Hello and welcome back to another book review. First of all, if you're new here, I post new book reviews almost every single day on both fiction and nonfiction books, so if you're looking for some reading inspiration or if you just like following book reviews on a wide variety of books, then feel free to stick around. Today I'm going to be reviewing It's a Numberful World, How Math is Hiding Everywhere from the Crown of a Tree to the Sound of a Sine Wave by Eddie Wu. This is what the cover of the book looks like, and it's a very colorful, picture-driven book. This is what I would call pop math, kind of borrowing from the term pop science. It's a math book that's accessible to everyone. It's not a textbook, and it's not written to someone who has a very advanced or high level of math skill. I would say you wouldn't have even needed to have done well in high school mathematics to enjoy this. If you made it through elementary school relatively intact, if you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, even if you need a calculator to do it, you can read this book and you can enjoy this book. I love mathematics. I received my degree in mathematics. I think math is just such an interesting and wonderful subject, but I do admit that math has a little bit of a reputation problem. I think some of that has to do with the way math is taught, and some of it has to do with the way we think about math. We think that we either are a math person or we aren't a math person, and I think a lot more people think they aren't a math person when in reality they just didn't get really good teaching in mathematics at a young age, or they acquired beliefs about math from parents or people around them. Math to me is a very interesting subject, and I want more people to enjoy mathematics, even if they aren't like me and decide to get a degree in it. And there's a wide variety of good books out there that are these accessible math books, which talk about many interesting facets of mathematics, which could be interesting to people who maybe don't even have an interest in math right now, or people who maybe want to start exploring this subject that they've traditionally shied away from, and that's where books like this come in. So the author Eddie Wu is a teacher. He also has a YouTube channel, but for that reason, I think he also makes a good math communicator or a math teacher. He is a math teacher. I think there's a difference between people who are good at math or people who enjoy math and people who are really good at communicating mathematical ideas to a wide audience. And Eddie Wu's that second category, although I'm sure he's also very good at math itself, he's also good at that second skill of communicating math to a wide variety of audiences. And so this book, in my opinion, does that very well. He effectively communicates math to a wide variety of audiences, as mentioned, even people who don't have a particular skill in math. As mentioned before, this is a pop math, a general math reader, accessible to all levels and even people who aren't adults. Even though this book is written for adults, I think you could even gift this to a kid who has a particular interest in mathematics. This is more of a math outreach book. I feel like this book is also doing what I'm trying to do, which is maybe do a little bit of reputation repair on the fields of mathematics. Eddie Wu, the author, takes us through interesting facts such as knot theory, which is not as complicated or not presented in a very complicated light, fractals, how we can look at these gambling or probability outcomes, all sorts of interesting ways that math shows up in our daily life, and in ways that could be interesting to you, ways that you may not have thought or realized. And he does this in a way that makes it accessible. So you don't have to have taken knot theory as a class in college, and it's not presented at that level. It's to give you an interest in the subject, to say, hey, there's math here that you may not have thought of before, a type of math that may be interesting to you, because part of this reputation problem is, in my opinion, the real interesting math doesn't start until you get to that college level mathematics, but you need the foundation you built K through 12 to be able to dig deep into those topics. But I think what authors like Eddie Wu does is they effectively communicate, hey, there's a field of math out there that you weren't exposed to in high school if that's when you stopped taking math classes. If the last class you took was algebra, if maybe you took a sampling of a calculus class and decided to skip it, you may not realize that there's all these interesting fields of math out there for you to explore and develop and dive into. And a book like this communicates what these fields are about and describes the way math relates to them in a way that everybody can understand without needing a specialized knowledge. So this, again, accessible to a wide variety of audiences, and I think this is a good option if you want to explore math as it relates to the world around you, if you have not had a good experience with the fields of math but would like to get back into it, or maybe you have a kid who's starting to experience interest in math or starting to experience a disinterest in math, and you want to encourage a continued interest either because they like it or encourage some interest because you think it's important for them to learn math and want to show them the way that math shows up in day-to-day life. This would be a perfect book for you. In my review overall, I would have to say that I would rate it probably a 3 out of 5 star, but that's coming from me. So because I have a degree in mathematics, I think I'm in a little bit different of a position. There is not a lot in here that was new information to me, and it was very simplistic to me. The author avoids a lot of mathematical notation, which in my opinion would have summed up some of this, but he does that on purpose. He's appealing to an audience that maybe doesn't have a good relationship with mathematical notation. They see some equal signs, they see some equations, they see some functions, they want out. I would like to see everything condensed so I can just read it in the mathematical notation. I would have to argue that I'm probably not the primary audience of a book like this, so while I can highly recommend this book, for me it was a little bit simplistic, and I think that if you advanced into taking upper level mathematics courses in college, this book might be a little simplistic. I definitely give you the option to read it and enjoy it. I can't tell you what to read or not read, but I would say that this book for me was a little simplistic. There were some good parts that I want to point out. First was the one thing, well, this isn't, I put the bookmark in the wrong spot. There was a discussion on Pascal's triangle where they talked about the different ways that this had been discovered throughout history, and some of them I had heard of before, but some of them I hadn't heard of before. So I think that was an interesting point where the book did introduce me to some math history stuff that I hadn't been exposed to before. That was probably the really only new thing that was for me in this book. The second thing was something that I just want to point out, and that is on page 101 for those of you following along at home. And it says, in fact, there is a long history of mathematical curiosities conjured up by mathematicians with no view towards practicality that ended up having deep and profound applications in the physical world and human society. And that kind of sums up the way I feel about math. There's a lot of mathematicians who have made discoveries and there's no application to real life at that time, but they've later discovered having big implications in real life. So, or they've tied into a theory that we've had and we haven't had any way of expressing it, but we have this mathematical curiosity that's been out there floating around for a couple hundred years, and suddenly the two pair nicely. And I think that's kind of the beauty of mathematics, is you can have this stuff that's just a game or just a puzzle, and yet even that stuff that's just a game or just a puzzle, even if the mathematician who discovers it doesn't know the application, it could years down the line have an application. And that's just one of the things I find most interesting about math. It's that there's unknown applications in the discovery of this field that you don't know how they're going to be used in the future. It's just one of the things I find really interesting, and I'm glad the book touched on that because, again, that's something that I like to think about or hear about, things that were discovered and then later found to be useful, just something of personal interest to me. Overall, I would of course rate the book 3 out of 5 stars, but I think this would be an excellent book and a book that I would recommend to anyone who falls into any of the categories of people I've mentioned in this video, and I would recommend giving it a read if anything I've mentioned in here sounds like you. If you've read this book, if you've enjoyed this book, if you have any thoughts or comments on this book or anything else that you would like to recommend me read, please leave it in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for reading, or for listening, I should say, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.